And mama cook, eats like a goosey soup. Right before sleep, I love Lucy too. Now we singing Nick at Night. The place for TV hits. Now I'm tripping like I'm Dick Van Dyke. Damn, I miss when we were kids.
The mics are on right now.
Steady tripping like, let's go away for
So if I decide to start singing along.
Yeah, it's kind of let the people know. Let them know. Oh, let me. I gotta change the thing up here. For some reason, StreamYard makes it so that it only shares it to friends. So I have to edit the audience.
Yeah. Instead of bitches and hoes, we talk
to include everybody else.
And plot twists and
that's what I'm doing right now.
With steady giggles and lows, we went through each of the shows on Fox. Kids wanna slow the clock ticks, passing time, talking Skywalker, Cyclops or Cybermen, Arkham Asylum, and vibe where the sidewalking. Style to MacGyver to Pride Rock to Fry Locking, fights with new Cybot or Psylocke and Psyduck. I spend the summer overdosing on Pokemon, chilling with my brother on the sofa while home alone. Anytime it thunder, then we wanna run close to mom. I remember posting with my bros in Hiroshima. Yeah, whether Christmas or it's Halloween, fuck a distance, they will always be a part of me. If life a RPG, I want them in my party. We a army, thick as Heifer, Filbert, and the modern Wallaby. We gotta be. Let's go away for a while. I'm a child. It's a strange and distant land where we only speak the truth. Everyone understands how we play back in the day. Let's go away for a while. I'm a child. It's a strange and distant land where we only speak the truth. Everyone understands how we play back in the day.
Started off like this. Let's do it.
Stuck in between the comment, no comment, kamikaze, feeling the force all in my body, trying to stop me from what's probably, well, definitely my purpose and further excursion. I'm fighting on the stage and somebody's closing a curtain. Is it for certain I'm what the gift of the curses? I'm living multiple verses, not trying to be less assertive. Is it a problem the girl is Persian, will be converted? Endurance can't curb it, static, I know you heard it. I know you heard it. I know you heard it. Heard it. I know you heard it. I know you heard it. They fight to manifest the malice of my inner demons. I fight to get a grip and find the source of where the fiend is. They're pushing to prey on something that they've never eaten. They don't see we've been growing. I'm here still searching with heathens. My chakras beaming too nice, spit it out my meanest. I'm gripping the right demeanor, so sick of the light just leaving. Dipping my feet in beat with the monster you're feeding. Too many cash and a greed and half stepping, they keep me screaming. So done grabbing onto them bump beats. It's been a journey, but I see I'm on to something. Still uphill, but I ain't giving up for nothing. Seeing these consumers are losing all too trusting. After you awaken, my upheavals a must see. Stepped in the mental session, speaking, seeing I must leave. Energy vampires try, but they can't touch me. And these mumblers about a stupid and strong beat. About a stupid and strong beat. About a stupid and strong beat. I can't take no shit from y'all. Okay. Not taking this shit from you. Okay. I can't take no shit from y'all. Okay. Not taking this shit from you.
Okay.
The greatest single cause of atheism in the world today is Christians.
Say what we say when we say it again, then you can go home to your toys. All right, I'll say it again. Now can I go home to my toys?
Let me get this straight. You don't believe in God because of Alice in Wonderland?
And you will know my name is the Lord when I lay my fingers upon you.
Irreverent. The End. The End.fm. I'm DJ Zouain. This is the hijack. No, this is not. This is not the hijack. Scratch that. This is actually Irreverent. It's the other show that I do. Hi, how are you? How are you? I hope you're doing well. My name is DJ Zouain. I am, as you know, as everybody knows, I am the audible chocolate of podcasting, and I am here to do another edition of Irreverent. Irreverent number 77. This fine Friday. The show, as always, it's brought to you by, among other things, Sanfording Saturdays. Sanfording Saturdays, which means that on Saturdays you go Sanfording. That's what you do. Big up the story. Sean Yell is in the building off camera. We'll be talking about him. He's the new ZE videography talent here. It's kind of nice. It's nice to have him on board. We also have Ordained Minister for now, James Thompson. He is with us. I'll be introducing him in a moment. The show today is really, it's an irritating show that I'm doing today because it stars the people who are most adamant. Let me switch over from West End. I don't think West End wants to be involved in any of that. The show today, it stars my least favorite people increasingly, which is blind evangelicals. The people who are most adamant about keeping guns, which is beyond me, are the same people who are unironically claiming to be pro-life. The worst part about it is that it stops becoming a thing of actually finding a solution. And we talked about this last week. James talked about it last week. But it has to do with the unironic claiming the pro-life stance. The evangelicals that are at the forefront of all of these fights, all of these cultural fights, are ultimately on the wrong side of history every time. We'll be talking about an organization later on that started on the wrong side of history, and for some reason they're still relevant in the evangelical world. Today's show is no different in the sense that we're going to be exposing the two instances in which the pro-life people show their true colors. And I'm going to start with the mass shootings. And it's a segment that we do way too often. We do this show once a month. We do two shows, the Hijack and Irreverent. And Irreverent we do once a month. And right after the last Irreverent, there was a shooting in Buffalo that killed 10 and wounded 3 in a supermarket in a largely black area. The 18-year-old kid purchased the gun for his 18th birthday legally, and a few days later drives 200 miles to the top supermarket in Buffalo and starts shooting the people up. He even streamed some of this, okay? He even streamed some of it, and after he was captured, there was a manifesto, because these assholes always have a fucking manifesto with racist comments all over the place. And so I put that on my list of things to talk about because it happened a few weeks ago. And then a couple of days ago, another fucking animal walked into an elementary school in Uvalde, Texas, and killed I think it was like 18 children and injured 3 teachers or something like that. The numbers are whatever. The one is too many. But as I was doing the show prep, one of the reports was talking about an NRA convention that was happening in Houston today, or that's happening in Houston, and how there are protests and people demanding to stop these things, to stop specifically this NRA convention, because, you know, kind of bad optics, if nothing else. Yeah. So I said to myself, there are so many mass shootings in America that this cannot be the first time that a shooting coincides to an NRA convention. And I was right, because it happens so much in this country that the last time this happened was 23 years ago after the Columbine shooting, which was apparently the one that made it in style, you know. So my point here is that a point that I'm making again. There is no other country where this happens at this capacity, at this level. When it does happen in other countries, people act swiftly and effectively. Look at Australia in '89. You know, this is another example of people, in this case, largely evangelical Christians, ignoring actual solutions due to an inconvenience on their part. So, with that said, I'm going to bring my homie. For some reason, still an ordained minister. I have no idea how.
We may actually get to that at the end.
We may actually get to that at the end, apparently.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, that may come up in some of our discussions of how Baptists work.
Oh, wow. Okay, well, good to know. James Thompson, ordained minister for now. You know, I've said this before, and this is something, I guess, that we'll talk about too. You know, We've talked about the fact that you are way more plugged into the evangelical sphere than I am. I've left it a long time ago. I still consider myself a Christian, but I don't need a fucking church to tell me that whether or not I love Jesus. Like, I know what the fuck I like. So, you having a pulse, a closer pulse to the evangelical circles. Tell me a little bit about your experience in reading or talking to people in the evangelical world about these last 2 shootings, because you've had to have this conversation at some point.
Yeah, they've been somewhat limited just because I'm no longer in active ministry.
Yeah.
But like I have been observing how evangelicals are reacting, observing how old classmates of mine and other folks that I know from my time in ministry and my time in school are reacting. And I think that there's a very hard split that's happening.
Okay.
I think there are some folks that I'm seeing that are just continuing to entrench themselves and say, like, we need more guns. The solution to this gun crisis is more guns in more hands. In more places. It's the same very bad idea just being repeated. Or it's the reaction that I have come to find is typical with me now. Which is to, like, have a very difficult time when reading some of these news stories, some of these accounts.
Yeah.
Just the numbers that are coming across and the ages of the victims, or reading about families that are just trying to get some groceries.
Yeah.
And they can't even do that in their own neighborhood without having to be worried that someone's going to cross a large distance to murder you.
Yeah.
Like, it's hard for me to even, like, repeat this little, like, very sanitary summary.
Yeah.
Without wanting to, like, break down.
Yeah.
Because I think about, like, how would I feel if that was my kid?
Mm-hmm.
How would I feel if that was my neighbor?
Yeah.
How would I feel if that was my family? And And I can't help but say, like, how can we not talk about real, reasonable, agreeable solutions that aren't a repetition of the exact same things that we have seen over and over again? Don't make us safer.
Yeah. That's
like
yeah.
having more people with more guns in more places does not make us safer. The numbers don't lie. The stats don't lie. Like, you have to really say and look at this and say, like, there is a problem here. There's a systemic problem here that is baked into us that we really need to think about and challenge in ourselves.
I think that right there is the problem. Evangelical Christianity in particular, and the reason I'm putting this at the feet of evangelical Christians is because 82%, like, I'm just going back to just the Trump numbers, and 82% of white evangelicals and 67% of black evangelicals voted for a conservative dude only because, and this goes beyond Trump, because these people voted for him because he was a Republican, which he's about as Republican as I am Chinese.
Yeah. Well, like, going back to the 90s, the classic term then was the Republican in name only.
Yeah, the rhino.
The rhino,
exactly.
And it's like Trump is that. It's like he is a very pragmatic populist.
I'd rather, but I mean, giving him the pragmatic thing is
Well, I mean, he's very much in tune with what he thinks people would like him to say.
That's true. True.
And going after that, just leaning hard into that.
I agree with you,
especially when that also aligns with his financial interests.
Yeah, well,
because that's ultimately, I think, what
that's all
Donald Trump his largest driver is. How can I continue to live my lifestyle?
Yep, eating steaks with ketchup on them. Well done.
and perpetuate this aura of success.
I can't believe I'm still mad at the fact that like above, well, not above everything, but just as important, we have an ex-president that liked his steak well done with ketchup on it. Like, I can't deal with that. But ultimately, going back to what the original point here is, that there is one party that has been hijacked, or that has hijacked evangelical Christianity. And this is the reason that we keep singing the same song. This is the reason that we keep talking about the same shit. Because at the end of the day, the evangelical Christians were duped into things like the pro-gun thing, things like the basically no compassion type of politics. All of that stuff was brought in after the evangelical base was duped into the whole pro-life thing, which is something else we're going to get to in a minute. 50 years of, and I said this before on the hijack, you got to give these hate mongers some credit, because they really are dedicated. They're dedicated enough that they spent 50 years to try and get Roe v. Wade overturned, and now it's a whole state thing. But we'll get to that in a moment. At the end of the day, what is the general consensus? Like, other than thoughts and prayers, which are bullshit, by the way, other than thoughts and prayers, what else has evangelical Christianity like? Is it basically on brand? Is their response basically on brand from everything else?
I don't think so. Not this time.
Really?
Or at least
enlighten me, sir.
I think there are a lot of evangelicals that I'm in tune with, that I'm talking to, that are just as appalled.
Okay.
Particularly at the school shooting.
Okay.
And I think that is still a worrying sign for me, when like the school shooting was the thing that was more catalytic to
their change.
Open expressions of empathy.
Yeah.
There was that in the wake of the Buffalo shooting, but it was nowhere near as pronounced as the expressions of empathy that I saw coming out of the evangelicals that I'm connected to in response to the school shooting. But I still think there's a large amount of, I guess, doubt that anything can really be done about it, which is baffling to me when like this isn't a problem that other countries have.
Yeah.
This isn't a problem that's the same in every state here.
Yeah.
So clearly there are some factors that we can look at and learn from to figure out what would be sensible ways to protect everyone in our society.
I think that the reason that we don't do that is for the same reason that we talked about the last time we sat down into the show, which was that they are not looking for actual solutions.
I think that's the obvious, or that's the only reasonable thing I can conclude when I see guys like Sean Hannity,
those guys are infuriating,
like out there on TV, and it's always some old white guy.
Yeah.
What was it? Suggesting an idea. We need man traps.
Yeah,
and it's like,
man traps. I heard that. I was like,
we need to get volunteer retired military and police. It's like, they're retired. I'm sure you can get some of them that would love to volunteer and do this. Are they really the ideal candidate?
Retired.
If we're going to give in and say this is just a security problem, because I think there is enough evidence now to tell us this isn't a security problem. This isn't because schools are gun-free zones. This is not because we have a lack of security for our schools. It's because of a fundamental cultural obsession with the individualistic notion of the right to own any and all firearms, no matter your reason for possessing them, that you don't need to have any reason to possess it other than a sheer want.
It's the land of the free, James. It's the land of the free. That's what this is.
And I think there is good evidence, if we actually look at history, if we actually look at how the Second Amendment has been understood, before our modern, before our modern era, I'm talking like post 70s.
Okay.
Thinking of that as the modern era, basically the post-boomer era, and or actually maybe the boomer era, when they're in charge of everything. It's been this exact window.
Yeah, I was like post-boomer. That's like in 20 years, man. Those guys they won't die.
But looking at these things and saying there was a different way of understanding what the Second Amendment was about, and after we changed that fundamental understanding and began promoting a different one, that this is a very individual right, that this is something that is possessed without any regulation by every individual citizen, we saw an explosion in gun violence that was then tamped down somewhat by the assault weapons ban.
Yeah. And then it was
lasted through the 90s.
Yep.
That also coincided with a whole bunch of other weird correlations within our society with regards to mass incarceration and like the heightening of the drug war and all of these other things that had their own weird cultural side effects.
I think that at the end of the day, when it comes to the I like to think of who's responsible for this so that we can remove them from it. And in this case, unfortunately, the people responsible for it, the people that are voting for these things, are people that have been duped for the last 30, 50 years about everything from gun rights to birth rights to LGBT to slavery. The Southern Baptist Convention, who we're going to talk about a little later, these fucking assholes started because they wanted to keep slaves, right? Do I have that right? Is that part of the history?
The very specific reason that is often cited is that Southern Baptists wanted missionaries to be appointed for service who were slaveholders.
That is bananas.
Versus Northern Baptists wanted all missionaries who were being appointed to only be abolitionists or only be, non-slaveholders.
See, and so like the fact that I'm a fan of looking at patterns, and the pattern has always been that the most conservative of the society is usually wrong about the about opposing the progression of humanity. It happened with slaves. It happens with the LGBT. It happens with minorities here today. It's one of those situations that, like, you look at this pattern and you look at these people. A lot of these people have advanced degrees. A lot of these people are smart, but they look at this. They look at all of the culture wars, and they purposefully jump on the wrong side of it.
In some cases, we have folks who will change their side on the culture war stuff from time to time when it's convenient for them.
Exactly.
And of course, we will see that in every era. And I think this is not really about like conservative, liberal, conservative, progressive, because those terms change like with our present context.
Well,
what it meant to be a progressive in the 90s is very different than what it means to be a progressive today.
Absolutely.
And what it means to be a conservative today is very different from what it means to be a conservative in the 90s or the 80s.
For real.
Or going back like to any other period of time. Like the idea of conservatism is often just the support of whatever is normal right now, let's keep it that way.
And how is that like
and that is ultimately, I think, a regressive way of thinking. I think there are good things that come from trying to preserve what is worth preserving.
Yes.
But when we see problems, we shouldn't spackle over them. We should actually seek to like figure out, okay, how can we make this better?
Exactly.
How can we have an impulse to improve not only our own situation, which I think most people are pretty good at figuring out what they could do to improve their own situation most of the time.
Sure.
But what can we do to really love our neighbor? What can we do to really improve the situation of those who are not us?
Well,
those who are not our families.
If you want to love the neighbor, you got to tell them that they've been sinning.
Well,
you got to tell them that they've sinned and that they're going to hell if they don't do it. And then if they don't listen to you, then you pick it outside their house. You make sure that they can't get abortions. You know, that's the
and it's that jump from how can I love my neighbor to how can I make my neighbor conform to my understanding of how the world should work.
Because
I know what's best for them, and so I'm going to impose my notion on them, and deny that there may actually be reasonable reasons for us to disagree about some of this stuff.
Yeah,
and that those reasonable disagreements may actually be a reason for us to be more permissive in order to better figure out what really matters.
Yeah.
What's really valuable, what's really important, what's really true. Because if we're not open to considering other possibilities that we might in some way be wrong, we can't grow as people. Well, we're going to be a perpetual toddler. And I think that's what we see in many cases.
You know what? I'm going to start
people behaving like the toddlers that they mentally are.
I'm going to start a new church. It'll be the Church of the Perpetual Toddler. It's going to be my new church. Services are hit me up around 1:30 p.m. I DJ at night, so but yeah, Church of the Perpetual Toddler with Reverend Zouain. We're all going to hell, just to be clear. So don't go there if you want to save yourself from hell. So, okay. How do you, even though you are less plugged in than you were in the past, you are still more familiar with evangelical Christian culture today than I am. What do you see a path to having a more progressive, not politically, just progressive in general, evangelical culture?
Yes, but I think it's going to create an inability for us to know what in the world we're talking about when we talk about evangelical, because I think we're going to have some new terms.
Oh God, that's true.
It's like either that or we're going to be going back to a classic fight, which is who's really a Christian. Because I think that's the only other.
You know what? I'm with that, because you know what? They like to identify with Christians so much that I am cool with just basically kicking them the fuck out of Christianity. Be like, no, you're not a Christian. You know why? Because a Christian is actually pro-life.
Well, and that's really going to be the question is like, what does it mean to be an evangelical? Who gets to decide that? There is the National Association of Evangelicals.
Okay.
And so they have.
Can we infiltrate them? Who runs that?
I've never really paid any attention to them because they're not relevant, or they were never relevant in my ministry life.
Okay.
So I just know they exist.
Well, James, we need to find an organization that the evangelicals that aren't fucking crazy, totally crazy, can just identify as that, because that's the thing about these particular Christians.
Well, I think the solution for those Christians of whom I am increasingly considering myself, is to just pour into our local churches and our local communities. When I think about,
you mean fight fire with fire? When
I think about the ministries that my church is doing in our communities, I'm continue to be very impressed. I did not know the scale of some of the mercy ministries they're doing, running food pantries, some of the other work that's being done. I know there's a diaper drive getting prepared for right now that's going to be done. I know we've got
which church is this?
So I'm a member of Journey Church.
Okay.
What was it? Based in Orange City. We also have campuses in Deltona and
they're a non-denominational church, right?
So that actually was a question that was brought to me a few days ago by another member of the church.
Yeah.
Asking, aren't we a Southern Baptist church?
Oh.
And I said, I am pretty sure we are. But I don't know for sure, because the thing that I would point to and say, yes, we are, is not currently published on our church's website. And so I don't know if it is current information. It's what I came across whenever I originally joined the church. Okay. And so I do believe my church is part of the Southern Baptist Convention. I don't know what's going to happen with any individual church, whether they will continue to be aligned or whatnot.
Yeah.
I am increasingly having a difficult time thinking of myself in any way, shape, or form as a Southern Baptist.
Okay.
I think this year in June coming up at the annual meeting in Anaheim, this will be the year that I think I will be able to figure out, can I ever consider myself to be a Southern Baptist? Now, that doesn't necessarily mean I couldn't be a part of a Southern Baptist church.
Sure.
It just means they need to be aware of who I am. And that I have a very particular opinion. Yeah. And I will express that.
For me, it's
but I'm okay. What was it? If they'll accept me where I'm at and not expect me to be, towing any party line, because I'm done with that.
So here's my thing. I don't want to be a part of any Southern Baptist church that's part of the Southern Baptist Convention because of their history.
And I think there's some good foundation for that. And that's why I think this year is going to be so critical. One of the guys I follow, Dwight McKissick, has a resolution being put forward asking the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary in Louisville, Kentucky, to examine the feasibility and take action to remove any names of buildings, names of programs, names of endowed chairs that bear the names of slaveholders from the start of the Southern Baptist Convention, as a part of following through on the racial reconciliation resolutions that have been passed by the Southern Baptist Convention over the course of the last several decades. I think his resolution deserves to be considered and passed.
Yeah.
And Southern Seminary should act on it quickly.
I can't believe that this is still a thing.
Well, and again, we're talking about an idea among conservatives is that the history is worth preserving and praising. the and praising is where it breaks down for me. I am all about preserving history. We talked about this on the last show as well. Like, I am not okay with burning books.
Yeah.
Mein Kampf. What was it?
Yeah.
I despise the works of Ayn Rand,
Yeah.
but I own them. and I would buy them if I lost the ones I have.
Sure.
Because I am for preserving her ideas, even as abhorrent as I think they are.
Fair.
So we can preserve, history. We can preserve our heritage even.
Sure.
Without praising it and saying that was a good thing when we know it wasn't. Well, when it is absolutely crystal clear. There's no more ambiguity. Slavery was wrong. Anybody who will not just say that, should be treated with suspicion.
Suspicion at best. But at the same time, and we'll talk about the Southern Baptist Convention here in a moment because of the sexual abuse report, because you dove into that. I definitely want to, well, maybe shouldn't use those words. I
looked into it more closely than you did.
There we go. That's a much better wording. My mind. Anyway, the point is that we let's talk about the Roe v. Wade thing real quick, because evangelicals were instrumental in that too. And this was all started with duping a group of people, duping the evangelicals who were largely apolitical into joining the Catholics essentially and joining forces toward a political party. And that was basically it, right?
And I think you're actually summarizing the history pretty well. Now, I've studied it mostly from the kind of inside baseball sort of perspective of the development of neo-fundamentalism and then evangelicalism and how those things came about with Billy Graham, and then the founding of the many theological schools and Bible colleges and Christian liberal arts colleges that have flourished since particularly the 70s. And you can't ignore the reality of the racist roots of figures like Bob Jones of Bob Jones University.
Yep.
And you can't ignore that was a part of that racist, old school, very old school Southern thinking was always present.
Yeah.
And always a subtext in so much of early evangelical formation. And when that evangelical movement that was trying to create for itself intellectual kind of gravitas with their theological schools and with their other institutions, Fuller Theological Seminary being one of those, Biola University out in California. There were numerous ones that came out of that neo-fundamentalist movement wanting to create intellectual legitimacy. And with that came a allegiance to a right-wing conservative politics, because it worked in their favor for so many things culturally, and it has now worked against us.
Well, now
for so many more important things.
Well, ultimately now, okay, so if Roe v. Wade is overturned, it's going to be devastating for a number of reasons, but it will also, wouldn't it declaw the conservative movement because now they've got the thing? So
potentially, I mean, if you're dealing with single issue voters, then yes, there's no, if your only reason for going to the polls is Roe v. Wade being overturned, then once that's done,
it's back to brunch.
I mean, mission accomplished.
Or whatever they did in the 50s.
Definitely a George W. sort of mission accomplished, but but mission accomplished, and you're now talking about an apathetic voter.
Yeah.
And so they join the already vast majority of our voting base that doesn't show up.
Yep.
And
now, so I want to know what the new culture war is in even the new abortion. What's the new abortion?
Well, I don't know that there is one. I think it's just broad opposition to change.
So it's
I think that's really where it is, because I think if it's not looking at abortion, it's going to be looking at transgender bathrooms. If it's not looking at transgenders and bathrooms, it's going to be looking at transgenders and sports. If it's not looking at that, it's going to be looking at, how do we get more guns into more people's hands, because that'll make us safe, because there's been another school shooting. They're just going to find ways to refocus on a broad swath to try and hold that attention. And again,
I don't think it's going to have as much pull.
I don't know, because most of us can't get our faces off of Twitter and TikTok and any other like new social fad that's come along. So maybe that strategy will work. I mean, it has meant that there is still a desire to have Donald Trump back on Twitter. It's like, how is that still a valuable platform for him or anybody else? Please come back here. It's like, oh, like the Donald Trump fans haven't figured out how to follow him somewhere else.
He's got his own thing, his own blog now.
Exactly. And so it's like if you want to know what Trump's saying, you can figure out what Trump's saying, because that's the age we live in. It's like you don't need anybody to like amplify it, because everybody can amplify themselves.
So like the Roe v. Wade is like I said, it was the old culture war that they really leaned on, and it was very successful. It was the reason that they got so much traction.
It was the most consistently talked about issue that I can think of. In any evangelical context with regards to political discussions. Like ultimately, like the abortion issue was the one thing that like everybody could agree on like all of the time. And
I remember,
and again, not surprising, considering we were all like taught the same thing about what life is.
I remember when I was just turning the corner of this whole evangelical thing, one of the first things to go is the pro-life, the pro-life stance. That was the first thing to go for me. Because of and actually probably either the homosexuality or the pro-life thing were one of the two things, because and I went to a church that did it, that made that happen. It was Discovery Church. They had a dude by the name of Shane Claiborne show up. He had a book called Jesus for President. A total hippie guy, very, very cool. And he was talking about homosexuality, and he was still talking about it in the sense that it's a sin or whatever, but not as much. Like it was kind of turning the corner. He was saying something to the effect of like, if you're a preacher and you're preaching about you're preaching, basically trying to scorn people that, a gay couple that shows up to your congregation, and you're not thanking God that they showed up to, whatever, like that was the mentality that you were supposed to have, that you're supposed to be thankful, not just bitch at them because they're gay.
Yeah. And I think for me, I started, I guess my liberalization is probably the best term for it.
Liberalization.
I mean, because the only reference point is going to be like my prior, more conservative perspective, which is like,
sure,
I guess is a fixed point, but not really.
Yeah.
But in terms of my liberalization, it started like when I was still in my undergrad, with me not understanding why is everybody so up in arms about gay marriage. Why aren't we like, and me taking the really hard right libertarian perspective. Well, actually not hard right libertarian, just hard libertarian perspective of saying, why is the government telling anybody who they can or can't marry?
Yeah.
Like, isn't this just a matter of like contracts?
Yeah.
It's like, we could fix this one with like, what was it? Something you could buy at like Walmart. Like be done with this.
Yeah.
It's
but that's the thing. Like we have, I think there was an old, one of my old favorite comedians, Dan Doof or Dan something or another, very like underground comedian guy, very cool. He was Iranian, and he was talking about how immigrant parents will overreact about the weirdest things and underreact about the weirdest things. Like, the example that he gave was, oh, you got an F on your test. Yeah, sorry. All right, well, do better next time. and that's the extent of it. But you leave a light on and they will fucking crucify you. You leave the light on. So like, I feel like evangelicals underreact about the weirdest shit and overreact about the weirdest shit.
I think that's actually been a recurring theme for us as we've talked about this.
Yeah.
It has been like, I'm not sure that we're like upset about the right thing all the time,
exactly.
or that we're upset about as much of an issue as we should be, instead choosing to focus on one very small part of it and then like forget about the compassion that needs to be extended to a much broader perspective and much broader view of life that like may actually change our perspective on this other thing.
I am so glad you brought up compassion, because I would say the Southern Baptist Convention is right there with the Federal Communications Commission as my least favorite organization.
You have a lot of beef with the FCC.
I mean, they don't let me be. They let me be me. So let me see. Sorry, Eminem. I went on an Eminem Tourette's thing here. No, like, I mean, dude, I was in radio. Like, it's like though
everybody hates the regulator.
Exactly. It's
just like the oil industry.
So, okay, let's talk about the Southern Baptist Convention and their sexual abuse report, because apparently kid touching is not limited to the Catholics now.
Well, and this isn't actually about kid touching. This is about sexual abuse of women in the church.
Okay, that would make sense too. Yeah.
And so this is actually bringing up some interesting questions about Southern Baptists, our view of women, like the
Don't say our, dude.
Well,
their view of women.
Sorry.
Come on.
I mean, I'll be clear.
When I begin with those motherfuckers, that's not me, bro.
Let me clarify. When I use our in this context, I'm referring to me amongst Southern Baptists.
Oh, you're still gonna
so I am putting myself in that camp for now.
For the moment.
And so we'll see what happens in June.
Yeah.
But our view, like, is the Southern Baptist Convention is having to consider whether our view of women is really on point. Like, has complementarianism just been a thin veneer over patriarchy?
Of course.
Which I think there's like really good evidence to say, yep. Especially when we look at like what modern, like contemporary complementarians, people who are like still fighting for this, even within Southern Baptist life, despite the fact that I thought this was settled in 2000.
Yeah.
At least from the confessional standpoint, but still fighting about this. And it's like, yeah, this is just a thin veneer over patriarchy. This isn't any different than what like has always existed, like in Western culture. We
just dressed it differently.
Yeah, and so as we think about this sexual abuse report that's come out of the executive committee of the Southern Baptist Convention, which we'll dive into that weird mouthful.
Yeah.
What we're seeing is a questioning of not just was this sexual abuse wrong. Everybody is pretty much saying yes, although there is a profound number of people that are saying it much more like passionately, and a group
much more gravitas,
and a group that's being a bit more meek in there. Yes,
yeah,
that was wrong.
Yeah.
And we'll get to them too. But that admission that this was wrong morally, and legally, and in every other way that we can conceive of, that in that same in response to that, we're not just saying, okay, how do we deal with that? We're saying, how did this happen?
Yeah.
What precipitated this? And people are actually asking the question, is what we teach in our churches about women, is what we teach in our seminaries about the roles of women, did we get it wrong? Did we focus on the wrong things? And again, and I think it's ultimately the thing we've talked about. It's like there's now actually a questioning of, okay, what's the whole issue here?
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be the fight at the Southern Baptist Convention. Is
this on the docket too for June?
It's going to be, because like this is the reckoning that's happening like in actual discussions, like in public and private, is like is the Southern Baptist Convention salvageable with what we know? And how much deeper do we want to dig?
Okay.
Because we've only scratched the surface with this report coming out of the executive committee.
Can we just absolve everything now? So here's my question to you. What's the vibe? What's the vibe within the Southern Baptist Twitter?
I think there amongst those who are, I'm going to go ahead and venture and say wrong.
Oh,
amongst that group,
shocker.
There is a quiet that is disquieting.
Okay.
That worries me when that side goes silent because of how vocal they normally are.
Uh-oh.
And so I don't know what that could portend.
So you're worried that these people that are normally very vocal have shut up, and that means that they're planning something?
I don't know what it means, because this is so out of character that it's like, okay, I have no information to go on. And I personally thrive on, like, okay, if I'm going to understand the world around me, I need some information.
Yeah.
and they're not giving me anything.
So what's happening here is, this is like when you have a girlfriend that, like, normally, like, when she's mad, she's like really mad and loud and then, like, you get to that one point where you get to that one fight where she goes quiet, and you're looking around for sharp objects to make sure that you're not about to die.
And again, giving you the sweetest smile.
Yeah, the sweetest smile. And that, dude, those are I am with you on being like, bro, the Southern Baptists might break out pointy hats, bro.
Oh goodness.
Oh God.
So I think there's that response that's happening, the disquieting quiet from one quarter that worries me, but
because
maybe it's nothing to worry about. But then the other side that really does appear to be, like, confident that change can happen, that we can actually that we can actually affect reasonable change within the Southern Baptist Convention. And so
just keep going.
So I'm hopeful that those folks are right.
Okay.
But there are folks that I respect that I think are on the right side of many of these issues right now, that have already left the Southern Baptist Convention. And so I wonder whether they are already ahead of the curve. And so I don't know what to expect. I'm not looking forward to June, but I'm expecting interesting things in June.
So this is in Anaheim, right? This happens in Anaheim?
Yep, Anaheim, California.
Okay.
I so hope that there are interesting pictures that come of the protests.
Yeah, okay.
I was at the Southern Baptist Convention in Indianapolis. Every time I've gone to the Southern Baptist Convention, there's always protesters of some sort. We've been protested by Westboro Baptist multiple times.
Really?
So, like, when they hate us and PETA's showing up, I'm not like I don't know what to make of that.
But I like it.
And so, but yeah, it's going to be interesting what protests happen at this year's Southern Baptist Convention. I will be very interested to see what comes in that vein, as well as what happens inside the meeting.
I think that it would be hilarious if you and I went out there and did a remote from the Southern Baptist Convention.
Yeah, I don't really want to go to Anaheim right now.
Why not?
That's like 3 weeks. No, it's like 2 weeks away.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, it's like June 19th or something. It's somewhere around there.
Oh,
it's. I know that's my daughter's birthday, and I know the Southern Baptist Convention always falls around it.
Oh, okay.
So,
oh man, I kind of want to go out there and do a.
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe at some point in the future, if the Southern Baptist Convention stays intact, I don't know. Again, I have no idea.
Yeah, what are the odds? Tell me. Like, what are as a gambling man? Would you bet on it?
I would give the Southern Baptist Convention will continue to exist in name. The question is, what will its existence mean,
bro? The fact that it still exists in name even is mind blowing to me.
And there's been multiple attempts. What was it, to change the name or to study changing the name? The most recent one was to look at changing the name to Great Commission Baptists. And predictably, most of the arguments against that were about preserving our heritage.
Oh, Jesus fucking Christ!
And again, it was falling into that trap of. And again, I fell into it to a certain extent too, although I really don't care what the name of the convention is. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's just the name that the treasurer has to put on the checks. But looking at the name change is like, it's again, like not just preserving our past, but really praising it.
Yeah. It's and there is not a lot to be praised about the Southern Baptist Convention. So how does this sexual abuse thing look for the Southern Baptist Convention?
It looks awful.
Okay.
I think that Russell Moore was on point when he said this is apocalyptic.
Okay.
Wow, like Jesus. This is like, and he's already left the Southern Baptist Convention,
Good for him.
And so I think his perspective is good, and then some of those who report, like, we're kind of on the vanguard of reporting this, the abuse that led to this investigation.
Yeah.
Some of them have been able to speak, and they point out rightly that this is just the tip of the iceberg. Like, this is not over if you really want to deal with this.
How many boomers are in charge over there? Is it all boomers?
It's the same proportion as what was it, our government, really.
Okay, yeah, that's what I figured.
And so
the boomers, man.
Yeah, it's not all them, but what was it? They've built many of these systems.
Yeah, it's
and that's what we see in the executive committee report, is that there was a systemic problem of cover up, of concealment, of protecting the image,
abuse cover-ups, not just for the Catholics.
Like protecting the image of Southern Baptists generally.
Yeah.
That motivated much of the actions that have been reported in here, in which there were hundreds of known sexual predators, sexual abusers,
that are still
that their information was available, like with a Google search. Their information is part of public record.
And
like
they were still active.
And they were still actively ministering in churches, not only because those churches had never done background checks, which some of them had failed to do basic background checks on, like an employee that is often in counseling scenarios that like you want to know whether they've had certain things in their past.
Yeah.
At least so you can ask them about it.
At the very least. And I think we ultimately saw that protecting the appearance of things was more valuable to these men, and that's the really important part here, to these men, than doing the right thing. They thought that the mission of the executive committee of the Southern Baptist Convention was more important, that the mission of Southern Baptists was more important than protecting women in our churches. Man,
like you can do both.
Well, here's the thing. I was hoping, I skimmed over what you said about the Southern Baptist Convention on Facebook, and I just I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna, I looked at it. It didn't look great for the Southern Baptist Convention, but I was like, you know what? Maybe he can surprise me on the show with some new news that maybe it's kind of like this guy Dov Davidoff, another one of my favorite comedians, has a bit about Lindsay Lohan. This is a very old joke. Lindsay Lohan drinks a bunch of tequila and does something, whatever. And he goes, no, that's not news. Doing something stupid with a bunch of tequila, that's not news. If you took a bunch of tequila and then wrote an opera or, did something else, then, okay, now we're talking about something newsworthy. But the reality is that I was hoping that this was going to be a tequila opera situation where you were going to surprise me and say, no, the Southern Baptist Convention, while there were a couple of assholes, they croaked or they left or they whatever, and no.
This is a systemic a clearly systemic problem within the executive committee.
Yeah,
and the people who we know were involved in the cover-ups and in the actively seeking out legal advice that encouraged them to conceal these abusers and protect them versus protecting the women. That these men are still, again, they have named chairs and named departments and named buildings at some of our institutions as Southern Baptists. They still have a platform within our churches and within our convention to speak and to
counsel
and to do all kinds of things, while it is now like documented and known that they should never have been doing.
Are they on a sexual offender list?
In some cases, yes.
So
that's the really horrifying part, is that the same people who were committing the abuse were also in leadership.
Wow.
It's like that the abuse goes all the way to the leadership of the executive committee. And again, the executive committee is the smallest and weirdest of the Southern Baptist mini entities, including our seminaries, including the mission boards, and including the other things that exist. The executive committee is only a very small part of a much bigger system and a much bigger culture that now needs to be investigated, not just at the national level, but at the state convention level and the local association level, because this is a problem that we need to figure out how deep this rot goes.
Well, I can tell you this.
Like, that's the only way you can actually save this, is to figure out, can it even be saved?
I am going to touch base with you next month to see if you're still a Southern Baptist.
Oh, well, yeah. I imagine that the Southern Baptist Convention will give us lots of fodder.
Oh, yeah.
For what was it?
For
next
the next
month's
show.
Irreverent.
Yeah. So I'm going to make sure that I figure out whether or not you're still a Baptist. Still an ordained minister, though, so it's great.
Which is actually one of the things that actually, strangely, the arguments that were used to perpetuate the abuse and to protect the offenders is the same thing that actually would be kind of weirdly preventing the church that I was ordained in from revoking my ordination, because there's technically no way for them to do that.
That's awesome. That is fantastic.
And I know that because I wrote the bylaws for the church, and so
it's a damn bill.
And so
that was a Bernie quote.
Yeah, and so I know what like the processes for removing a pastor are.
Yeah,
they certainly could have done that to me. They didn't, because of the way I resigned.
Yeah,
but then I submitted myself to the church's discipline.
Yeah,
and so I left in good standing. And so because I left in good standing, the assumption would be my ordination also remains in good standing.
There you go.
But the reality is, like, who knows? That church could issue a resolution saying that they disavow me and all of my like future stuff and all the stuff I'm doing now. And again, they could do that, and that would be a valid expression of their autonomy. Well, in reality, any church could do that. They could say that they don't like me, and that's fine. That's their opinion.
What? As soon as they do that, let me know, and we're gonna make it. I'm gonna make a big deal out of it. Like, we're gonna do like a big like a knight. I'm gonna bring a fucking like a sword. I'm gonna knight you and be like, now you are a minister, an ordained minister in the church of, what did we call it? A perpetual babies.
I don't know that I will accept that honor.
Why did you say honor like it's a question, bro?
Because I'm questioning it. like I'm questioning so many things.
Yeah, that's probably smart. So next month
we can have the conversation about whether or not I can still consider myself a Southern Baptist in any reasonable degree.
I cannot wait to bring you back to bring you to the dark side, my friend. I can't wait. Thanks for doing the show, man. I'll see you next month.
Yeah,
probably sooner, but we'll do the show.
Well, I'll see you on stage this weekend.
Look at you with the professional segues and shit. Oh my god,
I don't even get paid.
You know exactly, ladies and gentlemen. That was a professional segue to plug that I'm going to be at the hurricane party, the Sanford Hurricane Party that is going on tomorrow, starting at noon. I will be DJing and emceeing alongside Travis Seeds. Big up Travis Seeds. He's going to be he's going to be on one stage. I'm going to be in the other. We'll probably swap stages and stuff. It'll be really. That sounds weird. But either way, join us. It's going to be a fucking blast. The Hurricane Party, we're going to have the supervillains. We're going to have the Agrolites. We're going to have Pacifier, Less Than Jake. I'm going to be on the turntables. And then at night at 10 o'clock, I'm going to be at West End inside the front stage while we party. We party because that is what we do at West End on Sanfording Saturdays. Guys, thank you so much for hanging out. Thank you for being a part of the program. Thank you for listening to Irreverent. And I'll see you in a couple of weeks. We're going to do the hijack. I think I might bring Big Tim Murphy to hang out with me and do the show with me. So hang out and, Irreverent. We'll see you next time. Peace.